Hello, DawgNation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. Some very interesting stuff coming on the show. A lot of this recruiting-related. Jeff Sentell said some great stuff lately at DawgNation.com. I hope you're reading all of it. Don't forget tonight, Jeff's also got his own show, Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger, where he'll be sharing more insight on the huge number of visits that have gone down for Georgia in recent days and what's still to come for Georgia the rest of the summer, including a couple of big commitment decision announcements taking place in the month of July. At least a couple, maybe even more so than that, but that's what we kind of know for now. So we'll do a lot of recruiting-related stuff on the show today. There was one thing that one of Georgia's top recruiting targets has said recently that I don't think should get lost in the shuffle of everything else that's going on, so we'll deal with that. And generally speaking, just have some fun, have a good time. Mike Griffith is going to stop by later on. You never know how that may all play out. Also, one of our friends of the show, the great former All-American tight end at Georgia, Troy Sadowsky, going to be with us here today. We'll talk some football with him, but Troy's also a part of a really fun event going on this weekend that he'll tell us more about at the time. So there is a lot to do today. I'm really glad to be able to do it with you. It is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Harrah's Cherokee Resort. Find us online at Caesars.com/Harrah's-Cherokee.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
There is one thing that I have a tendency to say a pretty good bit on this show, and I like to think that leaders are repeaters, that sometimes it's important to say certain things over and over again. Some of you may at times say I say certain things too much over and over again, but once again, I think there is some value in repetition if what you're saying is important. And one of the phrases or the statements that I repeat fairly often is this, is that when it comes to what's going on, the inner workings of a football program, that media may think it knows, fans may hope that it knows, but there is one constituency out there that truly is most likely to know the real comings and goings of a program. What's really happening when you open the hood? What's really happening when you get behind closed doors? And that constituency is the recruits themselves. Now, at first blush, that may not seem true because recruits are lied to all the time. There's just no end to that. Even some examples around the country of the last few days of some sort of odd behavior from certain programs related to certain recruits, that recruits are always being given kind of this crazy over-the-moon sales pitch. Everything's going to be great if you come here. You're going to come here. You're going to change the culture, and all this stuff's going to happen. So at first blush, it may seem like recruits would be the last to truly know what's going on with the program because of the amount of disinformation they're forced to filter through each and every time they have a conversation with a coach, they visit a program or anything like that, visit a campus. It may seem like they'd be the last to know the true story given the amount of misinformation they are dealt. But the honest truth is that when you are very close to something, you can just sort of tell when somebody's lying, right? You can just sort of tell what the truth is. Actions have a tendency to speak louder than words. Any of you that have kind of ever played poker, or if you ever have a friend that has a hard time telling the truth, they're either usually staring up at the sky or looking down at their shoes, or there's usually some sort of tell that something's not quite on the up and up. Recruits just sort of have a way of knowing, are things good here or are things bad here? And the story that I've told in the past that I think illustrates this for Georgia, I think one of the most amazing things in the world, and we've joked recently about the what's wrong with UGA recruiting meme. UGA fans have kind of revisited that topic each and every summer because the moment there's any kind of setback, the moment there's any kind of sort of odd occurrence, disappointing news, there's a tendency of some fans to kind of pivot towards negativity and say, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, what's wrong with UGA recruiting? And it seems like there's been a version of that each and every year. And when the hay is actually in the barn for that year's recruiting class, everything turns out to be fine. All of this really started for Georgia in that summer of 2017, when Georgia at one point in time was ranked, and they spent a good bit of the summer, I forget the exact number, but they were ranked like somewhere in the 70s, like the 70th something recruiting class in the country. They were taking commits, with all due respect, from guys that were, very lowly rated prospects. You're kind of left to wonder, wait, what's going on here? How is this all playing out? That was kind of the genesis of the what's wrong with UGA, recruiting meme. And at the time, it seemed like a valid question because at the time, summer of 2017, building towards the 2018 class, class, at the time, it seemed like there was something wrong with UGA recruiting. But it's always really interesting to me that behind the scenes there and, kind of away from the watchful eye, fans and media, Georgia was actually on its way to building a recruiting class that would end up being ranked number 1 in the country for 2018. I promise I'm going somewhere with this, so just give me a little leeway and latitude here for a moment. That all that work was being done. And what's amazing about that is that the work to build that number 1 recruiting class for Georgia in 2018 was actually being done prior to the success that Georgia enjoyed on the field in 2017. In other words, if you look back on the timeline now, it seems to make sense in a way that wasn't actually true if you actually lived through that period of transformation of the Georgia program. If you go back and look and you see, well, Georgia had the number 3 class in 2017. They used some of those freshmen to win the SEC and make the college football playoff during the 2017 season, and then they carried that momentum along the way towards eventually being ranked number 1 in recruiting for the class of 2018. That just seems like the sensible timeline for how all that unfolded. But as you know, that's not quite how recruiting works. That actually, if you want to have a good, recruiting class at the end of the cycle, you have to do big work during the summer to make that happen. You remember like the Zamir White commitment, all the kind of stuff that kind of went into that. All of that took place prior to Georgia having the big breakout season on the field in 2017. So much of the great recruiting success that Georgia enjoyed on its way to being number 1 in 2018, the most recent season that those recruits had a chance to see was the 8-5 season in 2016. Yet recruits being the first to know there really was a transformation taking place. They committed to Georgia. They were on their way to committing to Georgia because they believed that Georgia really was about to kind of emerge on the scene. And lo and behold, that turned out to be true. Georgia, goes out and has, the college football playoff level success in 2017. It certainly seems like those 2018 recruits had a glimpse that something like that could be possible for Georgia because of what was happening on the inside with the program. However, there's also the flip side of this from time to time, that when recruits are being sold a positive message from Georgia, sometimes maybe some of those recruits aren't quite ready to believe that. I've mentioned this in the show before too, but I want to mention this today as a way of setting us up for where we need to go. When Eric Gilbert was a recruit on the scene for the class of 2020 prior to making his pledge eventually to LSU when he was being pitched by Georgia, I think you can sort of get the sense from Gilbert on the basis of what he did, with his college choice. I think you can sort of get the sense that maybe Gilbert wasn't quite ready to believe what he was being sold by Georgia. That's why he chose LSU, and had he not chosen LSU, he may have chosen a different school besides Georgia. He's at Georgia now, but if you go back and watch the way that his process for the class of 2020 unfolded, I think you were left to believe that Gilbert just wasn't quite believing the pitch that he was getting from UGA. In fact, let me give you a piece of audio here for a moment. This is Gilbert talking to our Jeff Sintel on his way to making a decision that at the time excluded Georgia on the message that he was getting from Georgia at the time. Now, I'll play this, and then after I play it, I'll explain why it matters today. Take a listen to this.
Coach Harley, he really likes me, and I really like him. Obviously, his history, he brings that up a lot with David Njoku, his guys in Miami. So, yeah, that's basically what we talk about. We talk a lot now. I went down there for a visit, and we got to talk, so that was good. We just talked about how he was trying to change Georgia's offense around with the tight ends. Or not change it around, but just add tight ends into it.
So they tell me all the time they're trying to change Georgia's offense. They're trying to add the tight ends into it. They're telling me that all the time. Unfortunately, I don't take great pleasure in saying this, but I feel like I'm forced to admit the truth. Gilbert didn't believe that. And as it turns out, once again, this may be an example of the recruits being the first to know. The Georgia's offense for that 2019 season, this is the one that would have taken place after Gilbert spoke these words. As it turns out, no, this wasn't a dynamic offense, unfortunately. And this wasn't an offense that was especially creative in how it used tight ends. I'm not going to drag James Coley's name through the mud over and over again, but I've told you before, I don't think Coley was an effective offensive coordinator here at Georgia. And you sort of get the impression that Eric Gilbert sort of already knew that. He just wasn't that sold on what he was being pitched by the University of Georgia. Todd Hartley's a great recruiter, and Todd Hartley has won a bunch of these battles, including with another 5-star tight end, Darnell Washington, for that 2020 class. But in terms of convincing Eric Gilbert that he was going to be a big part of the Georgia offense, It just wasn't being Gilbert just was not buying what Hartley was trying to sell, and that's just being honest. Now, all of that said to say this, that if you're really looking for a reason as a Georgia fan to be hopeful right now, that the message that Georgia once tried to sell to elite pass-catching targets that was not well received, maybe there's evidence today that the Georgia offense has evolved enough and there's enough true, well-established, genuine optimism because of Todd Monken at offensive coordinator and JT Daniels at quarterback and what Georgia has kind of lined up as a succession plan at quarterback after that. Maybe there's reason to believe that the new generation of recruits are being pitched on, hey, Georgia offensive transformation. Maybe they're a little more likely to believe that right now. Let me show you something that I think is really interesting. Jeff Sintel, our DawgNation recruiting insider, has had a wonderful stretch of stories at DawgNation.com. My hope is that you're reading all of them. They're really fantastic. I'm going to pull from a couple of those here on this show today. I hope you'll watch Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger with Jeff Sintel tonight. Of course, we'll talk to Jeff Sintel live again on Friday's show there as well. But we've got a July decision date coming from four-star wide receiver Kojo Antwi. One of the most interesting prospects, I would say, for the 2022 class because he's an in-state Atlanta area recruit who's getting a huge pull from out-of-state programs. He's got a visit coming up to USC. He is another one of these Georgia guys kind of connected to Texas A&M in sort of a weird way. In Antwi's case, he's got some family, some siblings that live out there, but it's another seemingly like Georgia-Texas A&M battle, at least to a degree. So Antwi's a really interesting prospect, and Antwi was kind of a part of an event here recently that Jeff had a chance to be a part of and was able to interview Antwi. The full story is worth reading. I want to kind of zero in on one small part of it. Once again, based on the idea that recruits, those who are invited to be inside the interior of a program, to actually see the skeletons, they actually see the bones, to actually see what's going on the inside of a program, they're the first to know if things are trending up or things are trending down. Understanding all of that, this statement from Kojo Antwi I think is pretty interesting. Let me read this to you from Jeff Sintel's story. Antwi talking about the visit that he just took to Georgia and the fun that he had there, the family atmosphere that it conjured up for him. But he also says this, Kojo Antwi to Jeff Sintel, DawgNation. I feel like Georgia made it clear that they were going to throw the ball more this year. I don't know about you, but as a fan of Georgia, which I am, the fact that Antwi says that, I take that to be pretty good. Not just for his own recruitment. Antwi may choose Georgia, he may not. I think there's still a lot to be determined on all of that. I certainly hope that he does, and I guess there's reason to believe that Georgia's in good shape there. But for me, what Antwi says here, as interested as I am in where ultimately he goes to school, the statement from Kojo Antwi there is not for me about his ultimate college decision. It's about what he is seeing from Georgia as he makes the evaluation of where the right place for him to be is. And when Antwi says, not just that Georgia's coaches are telling me they're going to throw the ball more. No, I love the three words that he uses in that sentence. They made it clear. Not they're telling me and I guess I believe them or, maybe that turns out to be true. No. According to Antwi, if you want to kind of unpack his statement a little bit more, apparently Georgia was doing more than just making this pitch to him. Apparently Georgia was sharing some fairly compelling evidence that this might be true. And listen, for Georgia fans who have been kind of hoping this has been the case for some time, and you got media guys all the time telling you, hey, this is the year that Georgia has the big breakout offense. You got all kinds of, superstars all over the place, and sometimes those predictions turn out not to be very accurate. Well, to me, the statement from a guy like Antwi matters a lot more, and Antwi says, hey, a part of my visit was a fairly convincing pitch by the Georgia coaches that this year is a big year for the Georgia offense. And if you want a little evidence, kind of back this up of what all this is about and kind of how it is that maybe Antwi is coming to believe this message in a way that some recruits in the past may have not. Go look at the Phil Steele All-SEC list. We'll talk more to Mike Griffith about this in a moment. But, look at all these offensive names for Georgia that do show up on Phil Steele's All-SEC list. You got offensive linemen like Jamari Salyer and Justin Schaefer and Warren McClendon, but you've also got skill position guys showing up here in a way that may not have always been true in the past. JT Daniels is a second-team quarterback. Maybe he's better than that at the end of the season, but second team's not anything to shake a stick at right now. Kyrus Jackson also is a second-team wide receiver. Zamir White as a running back. Eric Gilbert, who we mentioned a moment ago, shows up on that list for Georgia there as well as a fourth-team All-SEC guy. Now, I've told you before, at a certain point in time, some of these second, third, fourth-team All-SEC guys do have to work their way to being first-team All-SEC guys, but if we take Antwi at his word, a more prolific Georgia passing attack, maybe it gives them a chance to do that. And that's to say nothing of guys like Jermaine Burton, who don't make this list, or George Pickens, who's dealing with injury, or anything like that. So much of this show, and the people who watch and listen to the show, has been about that kind of deep yearning to see Georgia finally explode offensively the way the very best teams in the country do. And we spend a lot of time hoping that's the case. My suggestion to you today is when a guy like Kojo Antwi says, I was at Georgia, I took a visit, they took me around, they showed me everything they've got going on, I came away convinced they're going to throw the ball more this year. That's good news, not just for where Antwi ultimately ends up playing his college ball, but for what Georgia also is able to do on the field here this fall. Very interesting words from a big-time UGA recruiting target. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by our friends at Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort, and glad to have you with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. I know we had a little bit of an issue there on YouTube yesterday, but it seems like that may be in better shape here today, so I certainly appreciate all of that. Of course, podcasts, all kinds of platforms, the Apple Player, the Google Player, Spotify, worldfamousDawgNation.com. A lot of different ways for you to listen to the podcast. Really appreciate you being a part of what we're doing here. Good stuff all the way around. And I'm glad to have you with us. It's Mike Griffith here coming up in just a couple of minutes. All of it made possible today by our friends at Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. I got to tell you, last week, enjoyed a little time away. Summer, that's what it's all about. The weather's beautiful today, by the way. You talk about a great time to be in the mountains of western North Carolina. Plenty of sunshine, not too hot. A great chance to sneak indoors as well. Enjoy the gourmet restaurants, the tremendous casino gaming options, the wonderful shopping experiences available there. Of course, the luxury world-class spa. I mean, my suggestion would be take that significant other in your life, let them enjoy that spa. Maybe you sneak over, play a little golf, a little gaming. The sportsbook is open there, by the way, too. Talk about a great night to be at a Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort, or the other property, Harrah's Cherokee Valley River, also just a 2-hour drive from Atlanta. You got Eastern Conference Finals tonight opening up. What a game last night, the Western Conference Finals. A little bit of a ref show, but still some fun stuff. And a great chance to just get some action down. You can play some wagers, play some bets on those games, and enjoy all of that right now at the Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort properties. Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort or Harrah's Cherokee Valley River. Let me give you a website. You can learn a whole lot more about all of this. It's Caesars.com/Harrah's-Cherokee. That's Caesars.com/Harrah's-Cherokee. You can find out all the great stuff going on this summer at Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort or Harrah's Cherokee Valley River. So we have two fun guests coming up in the show today. Later on, the great former Georgia tight end Troy Sadowsky, good friend of ours here on DawgNation Daily, a frequent commenter on Facebook. Some of you enjoy interacting with Troy. He was a great player at Georgia. We'll talk to him about the current state of these Georgia Bulldogs. That's going to be a ton of fun. Troy's also going to be a part of a fun event this weekend. A lot of former Dogs getting together to sign some autographs, and I want to kind of help make you aware of that. So we'll do that with Troy Sadowsky here in a few minutes. Mike Griffith also coming up in just a couple of minutes' time there as well. Before that, though, let us go around the doghouse here today. And I told you there's going to be a lot of recruiting-related stuff on today's program. And, as I said before, Jeff Sentell's had some really good stuff on the site as of late. There was a story the other day with Jalen Walker. And this is one of those things where, both in terms of fairness to Jeff, because I want to encourage you to go read the story for free at DawgNation.com, but also in the sake of time, I can't give you every good thing that Jalen Walker, who has quickly become one of my favorite recruits for the class of 2022, I can't give you every good thing that Walker said during his interview with Jeff the other day. But just know this. Jalen Walker, I think, takes his role as a UGA recruiter right now almost as seriously as like Glenn Schumann does. Like, I think the way that Glenn Schumann wakes up every single day knowing that he's got to, earn his keep by going out there and being a great recruiter for Georgia, I sort of get the sense that Jalen Walker kind of views his own role at UGA in a pretty similar light. You will love Walker when you read in this story from him just how dedicated he was to being a recruiter and was a visit to him for Georgia, as opposed to showing up at UGA, expecting to have fun and have the red carpet rolled out for him. It certainly sounds like Walker showed up at a recent visit to Georgia, not red carpet rolled out for him, but sleeves rolled up by him, ready to do work, convincing other players to join him at Georgia. There was some really good stuff in this story at DawgNation.com about that. One thing in particular, I will share this because I think this is kind of a big deal. Travis Shaw is obviously a 5-star defensive lineman out of the state of North Carolina. Walker and Shaw are friends, and we know that Walker has some influence on Shaw and really tried to leverage that influence during a visit they both took together to Georgia here recently. So if you want some good recruiting gossip of how things may be going for Georgia with the 5-star defensive lineman Travis Shaw from the mouth of Jalen Walker, let me give you a couple of sentences here for a moment. Jalen Walker says about Travis Shaw that during his Georgia visit, he was all smiles when he got there. He was all smiles throughout the whole weekend. He and I had a ball together. I felt like the Dogs did well with him releasing the Final Four schools, which included UGA. Walker goes on to say of Travis Shaw, all of his Final Four schools are great schools, but I feel like the Dogs have made a great impression on him. Boy, you like the idea of that. Great impression. It obviously sounds like there's a pretty big, battle going on here, maybe with the in-state school, North Carolina, who's become really a pretty phenomenal recruiting program in the days under Mac Brown thus far. It sounds like they're a big factor here for Shaw. Clemson, I guess, to a degree, is also a factor there as well. But you can't ask for much better than that. Big impression on Travis Shaw, all smiles for the entirety of the visit. That is a very positive update. Good stuff by Jalen Walker. Good stuff from Jeff Sintel, and a great chance to go around the doghouse there right there. All right, so here's what we're going to do. It is Troy Sadowsky later on. Always fun to get a chance to talk some dogs with a guy who was a great player for this program back in the decade of the 1980s. We will do that. We'll have more on this Phil Steele All-SEC list that I briefly mentioned there, including talking to our buddy Mike Griffith about that right now. In fact, why don't we get that started? Great stuff here from Mike. First chance to talk to him live now in a little while, so let's do that here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
A lot to talk to Mike Griffith about. Have not talked to him in kind of a live format in a number of days. He was good enough to join us twice during our pre-recorded shows last week, and that was certainly a fun thing to be a part of. Mike, hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a great summer, and I certainly appreciate you being back with us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort again today.
Yeah, welcome back, BA. Hope you had a good week away, man.
Yeah, it was a great time. I really enjoyed myself on that. It was a lot of fun, and I'm glad to have you as a part of the program here today there as well. Let me, I guess, kind of start with this, if you don't mind. You wrote about this. Interesting to see, all of the Georgia players that kind of show up on the All-SEC list and all of the the potential kind of breakout years that Georgia has at its disposal right there, including something I know that you kind of zeroed in on based on the list that Phil Steele puts out of his All-SEC teams, the battle that's going to go on between JT Daniels and Matt Corral at Ole Miss. I'd probably include Bryce Young in this because he was Athlon Sports' second-team All-SEC quarterback. Kind of an interesting battle to see who emerges as the top quarterback in the SEC for this upcoming season, is it not?
Yeah, the preseason lists are fun because it's kind of like a preseason top 25. Everybody kind of does it different. Are you basing it off of last year's performance? Are you basing it on projecting the success? Is it about who you think is going to have the better numbers? Is it about who you think is going to have the better season, wins and losses wise? I mean, are you predicting what you think others are going to predict, and this is how it's going to come out? Or is it your team, And so when Phil Steele had Matt Corral over JT, I thought it said more about the prediction for the Georgia offense and the skepticism that maybe Kirby really isn't going to turn it loose. I think there's a perception, and certainly last year Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss really lit it up. But there was a lot of interceptions thrown. I mean, this is a guy that threw 14 interceptions, if I'm not mistaken. 26 touchdown passes, 14 picks. And this is the guy that's a better quarterback than JT Daniels after he loses Elijah Moore and his go-to tight end, his top two receivers. So I thought that a bit of a slap in the face and maybe a little bit of skepticism that Phil Steele's not bought in on JT Daniels in this Georgia offense.
Well, in fairness, Athlon Sports also had Matt Corral as their first-team All-SEC quarterback. I do SEC Country Live every week. We've had, analysts and magazine writers, things like that on the show the last few weeks, and there has been a lot of talk up about Corral there. And I guess, Mike, my thought on this is that I don't really view the Corral and Daniels comparison as all that interesting one way or another because, let's face it, even if Matt Corral were to have this gigantic statistical season, I think you would join me in saying that doesn't mean much for Ole Miss one way or the other. Their Vegas number, their over-under number, 7.5. So a good season for Ole Miss would be 8 wins. I think they have a hard time matching that, but that would be a good season. But even at 8 wins, they're a long way away from being a true contender there in the SEC West. To me, the more interesting comparison is for someone like, say, Bryce Young, who I mentioned before, Athlon Sports had as their second-team All-SEC quarterback. And so that's the other guy that sort of seems to be in this conversation, along with Daniels and Corral, to be the best quarterback in the SEC. And the Young Daniels comparison, Mike, I would say is very interesting because here's the thing that if you're a Georgia fan, I think you're hopeful of, is that Alabama's got a new offensive coordinator. Now, he may be a former NFL head coach, but he's still brand new to Tuscaloosa. Bryce Young is a former 5-star and a guy that played some last year, but this is not a guy who has starting quarterback experience. Daniels not only has a few games under his belt as Georgia starter in the offense that he'll be playing in this season, he also started for full season at USC. I do think it's very fair and very interesting to compare Young to Daniels. And this is where, if you want to sort of pin hopes on a Georgia championship, SEC, national, or otherwise, this is what you have to have. You have to have the experience of JT Daniels matter more. He's got to outplay for the season a guy in Bryce Young who's not been a starting quarterback before.
Yeah, I'll start out with this. I did Athlon for 25 years, and I know those guys well. I really like their publication. I think they do a great job out of Nashville. And certainly Phil Steele's come on, and he's done his magazine, and I think he's pretty thorough. That's a really good magazine also. Either one of those magazines I would strongly recommend as a great off-season read and as a resource. But when it comes to picking all SEC, it's a crapshoot, and the way they do it is, it is what it is. It's not like there's a higher power there with a crystal ball. Nobody has that crystal ball. The Matt Corral thing with JT is very interesting in the sense that these two are somewhat intertwined by Matt Corral's decision or Southern Cal's decision, depending on which version of the story you get back in 2017, for his commitment to no longer be binding. It was when Corral vacated that Southern Cal's commitment spot that JT Daniels took a look and said, hey, you know what? Maybe I want to graduate early after all. And so he did. And it was wrong. It was triggered by Corral's decision or USC's decision, those two to part ways. That's how JT Daniels ended up leaving high school a year early. So they're somewhat intertwined. They're both Southern California kids. Obviously, JT from a much better program at Mater Dei, whereas I think Corral is a Ventura kid. But still an extremely talented guy, and we saw that last year. But, I look at Corral's numbers last year, and I look at JT's, and if you want to base it off of that, Corral got to play against Vanderbilt. Call up that box score. What was it, something like 30 of 34, 6 touchdowns, no picks. Take that game out, or project what JT would have done against Vandy. So I think that is a good and an interesting. The thing about the Bryce Young comparison, there's two things here. One, I'm not even sure Bryce Young at this stage. I'm not completely 100%. And this is no insult to Bryce as much as it is the talent that they have and the rebuild. I'm not 100% he's going to be the quarterback by the end of the year. He's a different kind of quarterback than what they have behind him. And I would say all odds are that he is. Hell, Mike doesn't. No, don't go there. I'm just saying I'm going to give a 5 or a 10% margin that Bama decides they want to go back to a little bit more of a pro style. Because we're talking about an RPO quarterback here. So it's somewhat apples to oranges to the type of offense that I anticipate Alabama running compared to what we're going to see from Todd Monken with this pro-style spread and the air raid concept. So to me, the bigger question on the final numbers isn't about it's the supporting cast. And, as I wrote this morning, what Kirby Smart said, it's the guys around him, the running backs, the receivers, the protection he gets on the line. To me, that's what's going to determine how big JT's numbers are. And I think they're going to be big. I'm hearing really good things about these off-season workouts. We got a story up right now with 4 wide receiver updates. Marcus Roseman, Jack Saint maybe the breakthrough guy that we haven't talked a lot about. But the preseason teams are always interesting. I was a little surprised Jermaine Burton was completely left off by Phil Steele. I mean, if you're going to go first team, second team, third team, fourth team, my goodness, you don't think Jermaine Burton will even be on the fourth team? He had Gilbert there. And then at running back, hey, so much for RBU. Zamir is a 14 back, so they have 6 running backs identified better than Zamir White, who's the go-to guy, theoretically at least. At the start of the year, he'll be the starter. So, to me, there's plenty of motivation for the Georgia Bulldogs looking at those preseason teams, Brandon.
You mentioned the wide receiver story that you wrote at DawgNation.com. That just showed up a little while ago, so I haven't had a chance to read that. But you were talking about some of the offseason stuff that you've seen. For those who haven't had a chance to check that out themselves, and I hope people will go read it, give us a little bit more about what you've kind of seen or maybe heard about these Georgia wide receivers as of late.
Yeah, Rosemary Jackson, a guy that will also be at the X, and, we know that that's where Eric Gilbert is coming in to learn, but Gilbert's got a lot to learn. First of all, he's transitioning from tight end to receiver, but secondly, he didn't have the benefit of spring, and he wasn't out in California. So there's a lot of catch-up going on. He's got the benefit of JT's tutelage there, and JT is a great instructor. I mean, JT is a guy that this is what JT is, as Colt Kubelik said earlier this spring. The rest of the country is just now catching up, but Georgia fans know that we're talking about a student of the game. We're talking about a guy almost like a math savant. I mean, 6th grade, this guy's drawn up offense on the board better than a starting quarterback at a powerhouse national high school program. So that's what JT gives you, is the professor, right? He's the mad scientist in the room and the gunslinger on Saturday. So Gilbert has that tutelage and from JT, and he's catching up and he's learning. But you're going to have Rosemary Jackson and Gilbert at that X, and that is one nice thing. We talk about what are the weapons going to do. One strength, maybe they're a little green in some areas, but there's a lot of variety. And that's a beautiful thing in Todd Monken's offense with these air raid principles. And just when I keep saying air raid principles, just think of it like this. You line up and you run to space. You run to green. That's what the air raid is you run to space in terms of the defense can't possibly be everywhere. However they're covering you, they're giving you something. And the air raid is designed for the receivers to find that open space in the defense, whatever it is. And Monken has a lot of variety in his offense. The key is having a quarterback that can get you into those right plays, make the adjustments at the line, and the receivers that are going to run the precise routes and have the proper spacing, because that means everything. So when we talk about off-season workouts and drill work and 7-on-7, I'll be honest with you. Most years I would yawn and roll my eyes. But in an offense like this, precision is everything. It's absolutely everything. So when we talk about Marcus Rosemary Jackson being out there now and getting good work at the X after having, missing the spring with the broken ankle recovery, when we talk about Jermaine Burton being completely over the hyperextended knee that he suffered on March 30th, that's really big, to have those guys healthy and going through those workouts. When we talk about Arian Smith no longer running track, now focused specifically on football, his track is done, right? 4x1, lead leg, school record, second in the NCAAs. That's what he did for summer, vacation, so to speak. But now he's back. Remember, he had a sprained wrist. It's important that these guys are getting dialed in with JT in these voluntary off-season workouts. I think Georgia fans should feel really good about that, Brandon.
Yeah, Mike, I think it's going to be a really interesting time, and I know you're going to write more about this at DawgNation.com. I'll certainly look forward to reading that from you in the days to come. Thanks for your insight on kind of where things stand as of right now, and I'll invite folks to check out a very interesting story about the UGA wide receivers there at DawgNation.com. We certainly appreciate your time on that, and we'll look forward to getting a chance to speak to you very soon here as well.
Look forward to it, Brandon. Thank you.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, so really interesting stuff there, and I think Mike's take on Marcus Rosemary Jackson is a good one. That, Jackson was a pretty polished receiver coming into high school, and he was really working his way into showing you during the season a year ago what he was all about. Then he obviously suffers what was a terrible injury against Florida. To me, one of the most hopeful and exciting and enjoyable parts of the offseason thus far has been the videos that kind of pop up of Rosemary Jackson looking healthier. Smart called him close to being ready to play back during the spring. The video evidence we've gotten from that would seem to suggest that's a possibility. So I think that's a really good thing all the way around there. We'll get another interview guest here coming up in a moment. Troy Sadowsky, the terrific former Georgia tight end. We'll talk to him here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. Before that, though, I do want to squeeze in an SEC through and talk a little bit more about some of the all-SEC names that Mike was just discussing there. Before that, quick message about my friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Energy-efficient windows and doors. That's good this time of year. It keeps the inside where it's supposed to be, on the inside of your house. The outside, all those bugs. Like summertime is just crazy with the bugs. Even before, like, is it the cicada? Is that how you say that? I'm not even sure I've seen a cicada. I don't know if they're in Georgia or not, but there's also always a lot of bugs of all stripes and varieties in the summer. Keep that stuff on the outside of the house. Energy-efficient windows and doors. One of the ways you're able to do that. Nice seal. It looks good. Curb appeal, all that. Also great savings there as well. With Pella Window and Door of Georgia, you can currently get 10% off your entire project or 0% APR for 24 months. There's a free, no-pressure consultation where you can learn all about all the options, installation, the variety of choices that you can make and everything like that. So you see it on the screen there. Give them a call, 678-638-1496. That's 678-638-1496 or PellaofGA.com/DawgNation. One more time, that website, PellaofGA.com/DawgNation. Just tell them you heard about them here on DawgNation Daily, and I said they would take good care of you because I know that they will. All right, SEC through time here for a moment. So the rest of the all-SEC list, we talked offense a moment ago. Here are the names for Georgia that show up defensively from Phil Steele. And Phil Steele's just kind of one guy. I certainly understand that. And, Steele is probably not my favorite of the preseason magazines. The one I used to love was like the Sporting News, and it became Street and Smith's. I actually don't think that got published this year. So poor little out for Street and Smith's, I guess. But Phil Steele is kind of like a venerable magazine. It's been around forever. Here are the all-SEC Georgia defensive guys you got from him. Adam Anderson showing up on the fourth team, Lewis Seen showing up on the fourth team, Jordan Davis showing up on the first team, and Nakobe Dean showing up on the second team. And of course, shout out to Jake Camarda, who was once again named All-SEC preseason first-team punter. He got the same nod from Athlon there as well. So my statement about this is the same as it has been. You're going to have a few of these guys, second, third, and fourth team on both offense and defense, work their way up to first team on the real list at the end of the season, like the AP list at the end of the year. You're going to have about 6 of those first team All-SEC guys, much the same way we've kind of been saying, hey, you got to have about 6 or maybe 7, certainly 5 would be nice, of those first-round picks for the 2022 draft. You've got to take this collection of talent and identify a handful, half dozen or so, true top-end performers. And from that group, you see the candidates to do that. Now, you've also guys like Nolan Smith that don't show up on this list that are a chance to do that. Mike mentioned Jermaine Burton. He's a chance to do that there as well. But you've got to have a few of those guys really emerge. As far as the rest of the SEC goes, it's interesting to hear Mike's take on Matt Corral. I continue to believe that one way or another, that Corral is little more than a stat sheet guy, right? I mean, he may be a nice draft pick in the NFL. He may put up big numbers there at Ole Miss, but Matt Corral is not going to decide the SEC West, and he's not going to be a blip on Georgia's radar whatsoever. So, if Corral puts up all SEC numbers, I don't necessarily think that takes much away from JT Daniels. But I do believe that you need, because of the experience, because of the continuity offensive coordinator, you do need JT Daniels to outplay Bryce Young in Alabama. That's something that you need. If you're interested, the other quarterbacks that get mentioned, Bryce Young actually lower on the Phil Steele list than he was in Athlon. He's just fourth team. And Emory Jones from Florida shows up on the third team. It's of these guys, Mike sort of questioned whether or not Bryce Young could hold on all season long as the Alabama starter. To my knowledge, I don't believe they have really another quarterback in that program right now. I mean, I don't think Paul Tyson is a future starter at quarterback for Alabama. But what Mike says about Bryce Young, I would maybe say about Emory Jones. I certainly don't have any kind of extra insight on this, but Dan Mullen was not particularly complimentary of Jones at the end of the season. I could certainly see someone like Anthony Richardson competing for playing time there. It's actually, of the all-SEC quarterbacks that get mentioned, it's actually Jones who I sort of wonder how he handles his way for the full season there. When it comes to running backs, interesting to see names like Chris Rodriguez from Kentucky showing up, Kevin Harris from South Carolina. You almost wonder if Harris is going to be the best running back in his own team with Marshawn Lloyd coming back from injury right now. Obviously, Isaiah Spiller for Texas A&M expected to have a big season all the way around there as well. So pretty interesting stuff. You can read more about this at DawgNation.com, and the Phil Steele magazine will be on newsstands here coming up very soon there as well. All right, with that said, here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort, I want to transition over and welcome in a guy that I always enjoy getting a chance to speak to when we do get to speak to him, because in the decade of the 80s, this was one of the great players to come through Georgia, an All-American tight end for the Dogs back in 1988, and a guy who's still a big part of the UGA community and a part of a big event this weekend that I want to tell you more about there as well. It is Troy Sadowsky who joins us here on the program here today. Troy, it's been a while since we've got a chance to speak to you. I certainly appreciate your time, and thank you so much for being with us here today.
Well, good morning, and it's always a pleasure to be on your show.
And obviously, I want to talk to folks about what you guys got going on this weekend, because I think it's a lot of fun, and I want to make sure our audience knows all about that. But when you have a chance to talk to someone like you who has the credentials you have, it's always also valuable for us to get some insight on what the Dogs are going to be like here this season. You follow this stuff pretty closely. We see you in our comment sections on our show. A lot of Georgia fans enjoy the chance to interact with you there. What's your take on Georgia right now? How set up for success do you believe the Dogs are this season?
Well, I'm excited about the opening Clemson game, and that was one of the big deals when I was playing. We always opened up with Clemson. Of course, it was home and home. Now they'll be playing in Charlotte, but I think it's going to be an opportunity for Georgia to step up and knock off one of the big dogs out there, and they're right on the cusp of really making some big noise across the country. But we've got to go out and we've got to defeat the Clemsons, the Alabamas, the Ohio States, and once we do that, we'll be getting that recognition that the program really deserves.
I think your take on Clemson's an interesting one, because I'm lucky enough that I lived through those games as a young fan back in the 1980s. But, you know, I saw the way that your team, the Tigers, you know, there was real rivalry there, right? I mean, that was a game that really mattered. And it's kind of funny to hear a lot of UGA fans that do remember the 80s and know that time. When you look at this Georgia-Clemson game to start this season, you know, a lot of folks around the country just sort of think of this as a matchup of top teams in this age. But for Georgia fans, there's a lot of history there. There's a lot of heritage there. And a win against Clemson back in the 80s was a big deal. And when Clemson would get one against the Dogs, that really hurt back then. I mean, that was a true legitimate rivalry. And so I think for folks like us who you know appreciate that age, I think we like the idea of this being a renewal of all that when these two teams get together on the field here this fall.
Oh, absolutely. I'm looking forward to them getting the game cranked back up. But one of the games that we had up in Clemson was one of my most embarrassing moments in college football. We were on their goal line. Running back fumbled the football, and I was in the end zone, and the ball was right next to my leg. I had no idea it was there. The center at the time, Pete Anderson, jumped on the ball, recovered it for a touchdown, and I had that opportunity, but I didn't see the ball next to my leg. So I remember Coach Dooley coming off the sidelines and coming over, and he looked at me and he said, "Troy, are you sure you couldn't see the football?" And that kind of put Pete Anderson on the map. He made his rounds across the back of the end zone, holding up the football. I mean, that's a dream for every offensive lineman, especially a center, to score a touchdown like that. But I was that close to having it be my moment, and I failed.
Well, you had a lot of other great moments there at UGA, but I appreciate the humility you show in telling a very funny story there. You know, this is a very interesting time for the tight end position at Georgia. It's deep. you've got a guy like Darnell Washington who, kind of shows up on some all-SEC conversation, but there are also guys like John Fitzpatrick who've, played well for UGA in the past. There's a guy like Brock Bowers who steps in from California as a freshman who seems to be a real pass-catching target, showed some of that on G-Day. Eric Gilbert is here, although maybe more of a wide receiver now in this phase of his career. The tight end position at UGA, Troy, really seems to evolve. What do you think of the direction it's evolving in for the Dogs?
I think we've had great tight ends in the past. You can go all the way back to Carney Norris and Clarence Kay back in the early 80s, but there's never been a meeting room this crowded with great talent. And that's one of the things is that each of them brings to the table something a little different than the other one does. So they could literally start and play any combination of people in that meeting room and not see a drop-off in play.
Yeah, no, it's a fun thing to think about, and it's going to be a great time. And speaking of a great time, you're a part of a really fun thing here coming up this weekend. And, Troy, this is something you don't know about me. When we first got together and talked about the autograph signing you're going to do, I'm a big card fan. I grew up going to the card shows, the sports card shows, and that was a big part of my childhood, something I very much enjoyed. And it's actually really cool to see the way that kind of sports card market has kind of reemerged here. And there's a sports card and autograph show here this weekend that you're going to be a part of. It's June 26th from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Kerry W. Martin Conference Center there in Warner Robins, Georgia. Not only are you going to be signing autographs, Danny Ware, the former Georgia running back, is going to be there. Otis Nixon, the great former Braves outfielder, is going to be there. Caleb King, a whole bunch of former Dogs, former athletes of all stripes there signing autographs. It's going to be, I think, for the folks there in Middle Georgia who can get over there to be a part of it, it's going to be a really big time. How much are you looking forward to getting a chance to be around some Georgia fans here this weekend?
Oh, I'm excited about it. It'll help get me pumped up for the upcoming season, but more importantly, it's a really wonderful, humbling experience that, I played at the University of Georgia so long ago, but people still remember you, and get a chance to interact with people face to face and get a chance to talk to the Dog Nation, so to speak. And I'm really looking forward to it. Also, Lars Tate's going to be there,
That's right.
So it's going to be nice to hook up with him again, because I haven't seen him in a while, but he was one of the running backs that I had the opportunity and the pleasure to block for up at Georgia. We ran that toss sweep a lot, and he was a big part of it. And a lot of people don't realize that, he had over 3,000 yards. He had 36 touchdowns, and that was a running back that shared carries with other running backs. We had a big-time backfield with him and Tim Worley, Keith Henderson, Rodney Hampton. So you could rotate the backs. And it was again, you didn't have any drop-off in play, and he was a big part of that. So I'm looking forward to seeing him again as well.
Yeah, listen, if you're going to start talking 1988 team, I'll do that with you for about 4 or 5 hours, because you're right. That 88 team had, 4 running backs to play in the NFL, between Hampton and Worley, who both had great seasons. Keith Henderson, who was a terrific player in his own right. Alfonso Ellis, a part of that team there as well. That's a deep stable of running backs. And Troy, those of us who know you know this well. You were very proud of those toss sweep blocks. You got a chance to pin those guys down and sort of set that edge for. That's a big part of what led you to be an All-American tight end back then. And you've obviously, argued for Georgia running more of that toss sweep stuff here in this age there as well. Those are great memories for so many of us to see how well Georgia worked the outside during that running game, and what a big part you were of the blocking that enabled all that to take place.
Well, that was back when we ran the power I, when we had a fullback in the backfield.
That's right.
It's rare now that you see a fullback in the backfield. They usually use tight ends and H-backs for that, but we always had a fullback in the backfield. We ran off-tackle plays, we ran dive plays, but one of the staples that we had success with was that toss sweep, and it's really it seems every year that every time Georgia plays Florida, those long runs that Henderson and Worley had on those plays are always being shown again.
Yeah, no, it's great stuff. And Troy, looking forward to getting a chance to talk to you more as we head towards the upcoming season. I know it's going to be a great time here this weekend with you and a lot of former Dogs and former Braves and everything else in between for a great autograph signing there in Middle Georgia and Warner Robins here coming up on June 26th. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Hope you enjoy getting a chance to be a part of all of this with some Dog fans here coming up this weekend. And as I said before, we will look forward to getting a chance to speak to you very soon there as well.
Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure, and go Dogs.
Yes, sir. Yeah, listen, I could probably do several hours worth of talk about the 1988 team, and of course, some great moments there against Florida for both Henderson and Worley, as Troy Sadowsky mentioned there. So that, really, really great stuff. Just a good time. That was the final year for Vince Dooley there as well. So 201 wins, the cap on his career of a really fun, interesting bowl game against Michigan State that year. Troy Sadowsky, a really good football story for him for sure. And as I said before, a great weekend coming up there. I love sports card shows. Love them. And they're back in a big way, including this weekend, the autograph and card show there and Warner Robins. So good stuff. How about the Gator Hater roll call and our golden shoe? Chad Buchanan and Mad Dog both sent this to me. Dan Mullen being painted as if he was a clown portrait. That's really funny stuff. I'll give Chad and Mad Dog both the golden shoe for that. And our Gator Hater countdown. How about 129 days from right now? Dogs get some revenge against the lousy, stinking Gators. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. Talk to you then, everybody. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews Cooldown. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. You can trust R.S. Andrews to do all that for you. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. That is what they do. And the results are story after story. They've been delivering smiles, and they can deliver one of those for you here today. So check them out online, rsandrews.com. We'll take a few comments. We went really long yesterday. I don't think we're going to go nearly as long today. We'll let some of y'all get some work done, I guess. But we'll take a few comments, and we'll do it on YouTube here first. Frank Patterson says that I should add a 5-minute segment to the cool down where people can call in. So here's the thing, Frank, and this is the honest truth. I pitched that as an idea. I'm not saying it was unanimous, but I said, hey, would y'all like to start taking some phone calls during the cool down? Because we absolutely have the technology. In fact, there's even more technology like that now than there was, back then. That's actually not that hard to do. But I got a fairly resounding no. People didn't want to do that. I was actually kind of surprised that was going to be like one of our big kind of add-ons. Hey, we're going to start taking phone calls for the cool down. And people were like, no, we don't want you to do that. So maybe we'll revisit that at some point in time. But I think people thought that the phone calls would take away from the comments, and so they didn't want. I mean, I shouldn't presume to know what anybody's thinking about anything. But we got some fairly significant feedback that people did not want the phone calls. Let's see what else. G. Grace Bamboy threatening to block some folks over here. Y'all play nice. Foster Moss says we need to get a Clemson kickoff countdown. So I certainly respect the desire for those, and obviously there are a lot of those that take place on social media all the time, and certainly I enjoy that participation. And I would not be averse to a countdown somewhere on the DawgNation website counting down to the start of the season. If our erstwhile producer Connor Riley wanted to undertake one of those or anything like that, I'd be all for it. On this show, though, we don't step on the Gatorade countdown. That you can't be. If you're counting down for everything, you're not counting down for anything. It's sort of like if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have one quarterback. On this show, we count down for the Gatorators, which is not to say we're not excited about the Georgia-Clemson game, but our countdown on here, well-established intellectual property, IP, is the Gatorator countdown.
Did you just try to pass the buck and blame to me for us not having?
No. I'm saying I would be in favor of anybody in the big tent that is DawgNation. If they want to do their own countdown on their own show, I'd be in favor of that. But on this show, we're only going to do the Gatorator countdown.
The only thing I'll count down are Saturdays, and there are 10 more of those until Georgia plays Clemson.
I mean, every single person on the internet with a Twitter feed does the jersey number countdown. I don't dislike those. I think it's actually kind of a fun thing to see. As I said before, I would talk 6 hours with the 1988 team. I just like looking at old pictures. Yeah. If something's 40 years old, you should probably assume that I probably like it. Yeah, I mean, I'm all in favor of like, sort of, kind of look backs and countdowns and things like that. But we are staunch believers in the Gator Hitter countdown around here. Jay Shipes says that if we did phone calls, that we would take too many Facebook phone calls, which I think is kind of a sort of a weird sort of meta comment. DogFan3, funny stuff there as well. DMar42. Some of y'all are really funny, really, really funny. It is kind of, it used to be that like you would hear a voice like mine and people would be left to wonder, what do I look like? Back, 1,000 years ago, I got my start doing radio. There was always this curiosity of, back then, like, okay, what is this guy who I hear on the radio? What does he look like? And, eventually you start making a lot more public appearances and, do some TV, things like that. People get an idea of what you look like. There's very little mystery about what I look like anymore because I'm literally seemingly on video every 5 seconds doing something. So, but the same way that some people may have wondered what I look like, especially if you were to only listen to the podcast, I am always curious to like find out what some of you look like. And I'm always very fascinated by that because I get a chance to meet a lot of you and I'm always like, I'm just kind of fascinated by that. So finding out what some of you sounded like would also probably be pretty interesting there too. Over here on Facebook for a moment. Isaac Cruz asking about Branson Robinson, whose commitment's coming up in late July. And, I mean, the best I can tell, that's pretty good for the Dogs right now. That's one of those that, I'm hesitant to say how good it seems to look for Georgia because my honest answer to that is it seems to look really, really good for Georgia. But you're conditioned to believe that nothing's quite as easy as it looks. But in the case of Branson Robinson, he has said nothing but good stuff about the Dogs. And my prediction is that he is going to be as popular as anybody that if he does commit and eventually sign with Georgia, he's going to be as popular as anybody. Branson Robinson there are 3 guys that three guys at least in this 2022 class that I would absolutely make a part of my board of directors. I mean, I would absolutely do that. No questions asked. Robinson is one. Now, obviously I'm basing this only on their public persona and anybody can have, slightly different, things are not always what they seem, but I feel fairly confident saying this on the basis of kind of what I've seen. Like Branson Robinson, incredible dude, comes across as just like the salt of the earth. Malachi Starks, I feel the exact same way about, and Jalen Walker, I feel the exact same way about. If I was going to create like a DawgNation Daily board of directors, like you could certainly do worse than Robinson, Starks, and Walker. There are just some like sharp guys. I think Oscar Delp's kind of one of those guys there as well. There is just some really sharp guys in this 2022 class, and I like Walker, Starks, Robinson as much as I've liked anybody. I mean, I'm saying that kind of as a fan, but also as someone who just observes kind of what goes on here, and I like what I see there from those guys for sure. Moose Tames, thank you for the kind words. Matt Rucamina says, how about a comedy hour with Clemson fans who claim they go 12-0 in the SEC? Yeah, it is kind of funny. These Georgia Clemson fans getting to know each other a little bit more over these last few months on social media have been pretty interesting. Scott Harris asked about Dominic Blaylock. I have to say, and I'm not saying this is bad news, I'm just answering the question as honestly as I can. It just seems like it's pretty quiet on the Blaylock front right now. And that doesn't necessarily mean anything because, I mean, it is summertime. These guys are, out doing their thing and whatever else. But it does seem a little quiet on the Dominic Blaylock front at the moment. I hope we get some good updates on that here very soon. Let's see what else. By the way, Chad Buchanan in the comments section, one of our Golden Shoe winners for today, sharing the trophy with Mad Dog. This is like what were some of the, I guess, prominently 1990 national championship. Didn't you have Washington and Miami that shared one around that same time? And what'd you have, Nebraska, Michigan? Did they share a national championship? Chad Buchanan and And Mad Dog sharing a golden shoe today. Let's see what else is going on. Jamie Kennedy says he sent me something to my messenger. I apologize for that, Jamie. I am not super active on Facebook. In fact, I think I got to put Messenger on my phone. So I will have to do that. And Jamie, I apologize. It's one of those things where, like, my Facebook Messenger is a little bit like my Twitter. I try to stay more active on Twitter, but some of you know this is like, I'll go through and like respond to like 24 tweets in like one sitting. Like I'll generally like get into my Messenger like once about every 6 months, and so I'll try to be more active on that. Because the truth is, I've actually done a little bit more on Facebook lately, and it's kind of nice to sort of see what people are saying. I mean, there's a lot of Georgia fans on Facebook, and they're all sharing cool memes and things like that. I need to probably do more of that. Bill Sanders says he would rather have phone calls as part of the Cooldown than take comments from YouTube, which I think is really funny. Miriam Martin Corbin asks a very interesting question. She says, will there be a DawgNation invasion to Charlotte? That is something I hope we get a chance to talk about very soon. Nick Roundtree says it's June 23rd, 2021, and Darth Mullen is still the biggest clown in college football. I like that. I like that for sure. Matt Rugavina says, imagine a world in which Tech and Colorado shared a national championship. Was the earth on a weird tilt that year? It is, yeah. There was a strange era in college football there for a little while where you had a lot of just strange stuff happening. And the 1990 season was really a pretty strange one for sure. And then, like, what was even stranger than that is, and not that I want to participate in any Tech propaganda here, but this is one of those things I would love for social media to existed for. So Colorado beat Missouri that year, back when Missouri was still a part of the Big Eight. They beat Missouri, and they got a 5th down. And like I said, this is Tech propaganda, but it is true that part of the way that Colorado beat Missouri, because they were like 10-1-1, like they didn't not have a great record. And one of their wins came because the refs gave them a 4th down, and they didn't get it, and they just gave them another 4th down. Like, it happened. I mean, it's not as egregious as the blown call by Al Ford in the 1999 game in which Tech benefited from the Jasper Sanks fumble. Not as egregious as that, but it was pretty egregious. By the way, I heard the other day they were showing like the 99 Georgia Tech game on the ACC network. You can talk about shameless. If you can show that on a network as one of the good things that happened for your league, you are completely without the ability to be shamed. Let's see what else. Cassie Turner says, I'm just happy to be 9 Saturdays from beating Clemson. Yeah, it's going to be a good time, Cassie, for sure. Good to see you in the comment section. All right, 1 or 2 more here. JRicks2510, that's a good point. I was going to mention this on the show. We may mention this in SEC Country Live today. What a scene in Omaha. Unbelievable win for Mississippi State against Virginia. Jay Rick says it'd be great to see the Dogs back there sooner rather than later. Yeah, this, like, when you put on the list of like disappointing things that have happened to Georgia, this baseball team had so much momentum going into the 2020 season. Not just with the team, although clearly they would have been, one of the big favorites to make it to Omaha with the pitching that they had and everything else. But like the fan momentum around Georgia baseball was just so intense. Georgia had been selling out games, and there was just a lot of energy around the baseball program in Athens. And then you have this potential College World Series level team, and the season's just taken away from you. Like, that's as Georgia as it gets. Like you talk about on the list of like disappointments, there are fewer baseball fans than obviously the other sports, certainly football. But that is just an absolute punch in the stomach to think that 2020 season was taken away from Georgia. And obviously this year's team, not quite as talented as that would have been. But when you watch what's happening in Omaha right now and the excitement that Tennessee, and I hate to even say this, but it is true, the excitement that Tennessee has been able to enjoy on the way to getting there. Some of you saw the thrilling walk-off win they had in the regional, eventually, win a really fun super regional. And, Mississippi State getting there, and Tom Hart, who we've had on the show before, SEC Network broadcaster, shared some really cool video of the Mississippi State baseball team coming back to their hotel, and they were just greeted like raucously by all these Bulldogs fans who are traveling out there. Omaha supposedly is a great place to visit for the College World Series. You watch all this that's unfolding right now. We're not talking a ton about it on the show because we do try to keep it to football, at least when Georgia's not involved. But there is so much fun happening in Omaha right now, and I just would love nothing more than to see Georgia be a part of it. All right, let's see what else. DMart42 says, do the Hawks get the win in Milwaukee tonight? Boy, it'd be a great thing to do. I mean, like the one thing I think you're left to say is that, if it was a fully healthy Brooklyn that you're playing with, Harden and Kyrie and Kevin Durant, if it's a Brooklyn team with like the full big three and everything like that, that obviously is a fairly insurmountable challenge, right? I mean, you would just not really feel like you had much of a chance there. By comparison, this Milwaukee team, Giannis has showed up small in the playoffs more time than I can list on one hand. It is a much more winnable scenario, and things obviously aren't perfect for Atlanta. We understand that. They were dealing with their own injury situation a bit too, but I mean, I think the one thing that compared to the last time that Atlanta was in the Eastern Conference Finals, the team that I thought was very good, but Atlanta very banged up at that time against LeBron James. I don't know how legit you thought your chances were. In this particular case, I would say Atlanta is much more kind of in play for all of this. In fact, let me see if I can do this here really quick for just a moment. I'd be very curious to see kind of how all this is viewed. Yeah, so they're an 8-point underdog here tonight. So that's not a small number necessarily. But at the same time, I mean, not an impossibility either. I'll take Atlanta with a puncher's chance there in that this evening. I will. I'm glad you asked. Moose Tames mentioning the Twitch thing. Yeah, I said before I went on vacation I was going to start doing more Twitch and see if we can move more people over there, and we'll continue that. We also have a new video platform coming very soon, which I'm kind of excited about. Steve Highland says the Trayon Webb announcement. I was going to mention that during the show, and I just flat out forgot to. I apologize. I think I even sent that. We didn't use it. Throw that up on the Sometimes it's a little dicey if I want to remember everything that I'm supposed to do during the show. But Trayon Webb did tweet out, change of plans. He says, I'll be making an announcement tomorrow at noon. Very important, the word announcement here. I gather from the online chatter, people don't think this is a commitment. So I think that's pretty important. Webb, you'll remember at one point in time, was a Georgia commit. And that seems like it was about 12 years ago that he was a Georgia commit. Now we're like 1 year away from the 2023 guys having the stage to themselves. So this is a little bit more, top of mind than it would have been when Webb was committed to Georgia. He's a 5-star athlete. I think he's considered a running back at the college level. So I believe his announcement today is not a commitment. At least that's kind of the general sense you get from the chatter. Maybe a paring down of finalists or something along those lines. But he says noon, so we'll watch that for sure. So I'm glad you asked about that too, because I was supposed to make that on the show and just didn't do it. Sometimes it's just really hard to remember everything you planned on doing, to be completely honest with you. Miriam Martin Corbett, I didn't know this. She says her dad was a local sportscaster. That's really cool, Miriam. As much as you and I have talked, if you've told me that, I've either forgotten about that. I just did not know that. Clay Dyke says Webb may be adding a school, and he very well might be. But it's not expected to be a commitment, I do not believe. All right, like one more, and then we're gone. Back on YouTube just for a moment. If I can. All right, here we go. All right, let's see. Some of y'all are very funny. Very funny. Crow King 123 hopes Webb comes back to Georgia. I think a lot of folks probably do. By the way, how about the D-Mart and Foster Moss talking about the Western Conference Finals from last night? That was a crazy ending with the 8 and dunk and the ref show where, I mean, like, I've been saying this forever, and I think people at first thought I was trolling. I'm in favor of no replay review whatsoever. I would just rather have human error, dumb officials blowing games. I would actually prefer that as opposed to like the deliberations that go on about every little thing. And I know there's some thought that, Phoenix doesn't get that play last night for the toss dunk at the end if you don't, have the delay that sets up for that. I'll say this really, really briefly because it's not an NBA show. Let me tell you who I thought did a great job last night because, I was not fully aware of everything that was going on here. I thought that Jeff Van Gundy in the analyst chair last night for the game was doing a terrific job at the end there of pointing out a couple of very specific rules that I'm not quite so sure that I knew. In other words, that you can't have offensive goaltending on an inbound play. I didn't know that. But Van Gundy said that immediately. While you're having that long delay for the review, if he doesn't say that, I guess I would have been left to assume they may be looking to see if Ayton took the ball off the cylinder or something along those lines. And Van Gundy was very quick to clear that up. Was all on top of the substitution situation there at the end that took about 12 minutes to sort out about who was actually supposed to be on the floor for the final sequence, the 0.7 of a second. A lot of times we complain about broadcasters because sometimes it seems like they add very little. In this particular case, I thought that Jeff Van Gundy last night truly added something by being really on top of a couple of pretty obscure rules there at the end of that. But fun stuff with the Western Conference Finals last night. G. Gary Spammer Boy says the Suns will lose the next two in L.A., so there you have it on that. All right, good stuff. We got to go. Boy, it sounds like G. Grace is just blocking folks left and right. Boy, that's a tough scene. Tough scene all the way around. Gee, I expect more from you than that. Anyway, although I'm not going to get into whatever. I didn't see what the offending messages were, so I can't take a side on that one way or another. All right, let me just go for now. Hey, speaking of Eastern Conference Finals tonight, Atlanta Journal-Constitution online, AJC.com. This is a very unexpected, pleasant surprise here in this month of June, and a great time to be had all the way around. Good coverage from Milwaukee on that as the Hawks get going tonight. Historic. Just the second time this franchise has been in the Eastern Conference Finals. It's also a cool thing for those of us watching on TV. Final playoff series for Marv Albert, a guy that's been calling NBA games literally for the entirety of my lifetime. That's an amazing thing to consider. And he'll do his last ones for TNT here this week, next few days. So that'll be cool all the way around. Really good coverage, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC.com, about that. Less good news involving the Braves, it sort of seems like, although the weirdness of like the banned substances and there's some strange video coming out of some of these Major League Baseball games right now. Maybe you've seen some of that kind of stuff as they're trying to crack down on these substances the pitchers are allegedly using. This is all weird to me. But nonetheless, we'll go for now. Y'all have a great day. I'll see you back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thanks to R.S. Andrews for making the R.S. Andrews Cooldown possible. Find them online at rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. Thanks to Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort making the show possible. Check them out. Great getaway, just 2-hour drive from Atlanta. See you tomorrow, 10 a.m., DawgNation Daily, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. We'll talk to you then. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.